Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Paige host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money and the home as a team. I'm Brian Paige, founder of Modern Husbands. Sometimes our listeners want more support than a podcast can give, individual or couple support, which I now provide. Details can be found at modernhusbands.com, or you can email me at brian@modernhusbands.com. For today's podcast, we welcome Dr. Abdullah, a war refugee turned Ph.D. in human-computer interaction. Axe is the founder and the CEO of Third Brain, a company he founded with his wife and co-founder Paige. Together, they are creating an application that addresses the mental load we all experience managing home and the life as busy dual-career couples. You're going to love his story and today's great conversation about the mental load. Enjoy the show. Axe, thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Your life's journey has inspired you to do what you do today. Let's start with a conversation about your journey beginning in 2003. What can you share?
Absolutely. I'm happy to share sort of my journey leading up to this moment. 2003 was definitely a pivotal year in my life. I mean, before that, I was born and raised in Baghdad in Iraq. And then, as you know, the year and the location will tell you something, is that in 2003, there was a big war in Iraq. My life took quite a lot of different turns. Actually, when the war started, I was living, of all places, in Italy, in Rome, with my family. I was 13, 14 years old. And my father used to work for the government, and we had to leave Italy in like 48 hours. And it was quite, the shock and the journey for somebody who's that young, and having to, leave a place where I was safe and go into a war zone and live there for the subsequent few years. It was a very tough journey, and it shaped me in a lot of different ways. And then in 2006, I moved out of my country and left it, and that was the last time I was ever there. And by 2008, I made my way via the United Nations refugee program into Baltimore, Maryland. So I came to this country. I was 19 years old, had like $20 in my pocket, thankfully with my family intact and unharmed. And, I just walked into a community college in Baltimore, shout out to CCBC Essex, uh, and said, I want to go to med school. What do I do? And they said, well, walk into that room, take some English and math exams, because this high school diploma that you gave us is written in Arabic. We don't know what that is. So I started my way as if, like any high school dropout and anybody with a GED, wanting to go to school. Took placement tests. They were like, okay, you can obviously speak English. I grew up with both my parents speaking dual languages, and my math skills were pretty decent. So I started taking classes and working at a local hospital, Johns Hopkins Hospital, as an interpreter. So I was, going into medical appointments, interpreting for patients and helping them out that way. And as I was doing that, I found myself repetitively interpreting the same phrases over and over again. So I would like have to drive maybe an hour to go to one of the hospitals to do a routine check-in. When doctors, they do their rounds, they ask the same questions. And I was in college, and at that time, I don't know, it was like during that time or kind of around it, The Social Network had come out, the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big movie guy, and I just was really infatuated by the idea of a college kid making an app. So I taught myself how to program and created my first sort of creation, an app called Interpreter. which is like instant interpreter, where I took the common phrases that I was interpreting and put them in a flow where, you open the app and you identify yourself. Are you a doctor or are you a patient? And select the language that you speak. And then it facilitates those conversations in a very programmatic way. And that was before the times where like Google Translate was good enough that it can actually translate what you're saying.
Mhm.
Um, and I learned my first lesson in entrepreneurship there is that just because you build something doesn't mean it's gonna take off or it's gonna be beneficial, because zero people used it. Because I didn't know anybody, I didn't know who to give it to, or like even because I was working at a hospital, I didn't know what department I should like promote this to or whatever. But thankfully, what it did do is A, it taught me a skill. I learned how to program. B, it showed me that I actually love creativity and creating things from scratch a lot more than I love medicine. And working at a hospital showed me that I actually hated medicine. I did not like the life of a doctor or being around sick people all the time, or just the idea of just continuously fixing what's broken over and over again. I wanted
Mm.
to create things. I've always been sort of an artist, and always painted and designed clothes and I even like designed the blueprints for our home extension when I was in the 5th grade, that actually the architects took and extended our house back home. And so that was medicine was not really a fit for me. So I by that time I had switched over to a 4-year University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and switched uh, majors to computer science and information systems. Um, and the good thing about that app is that I showed it to one of my professors, Dr. Amy Hurst, who's now a professor at NYU, and she saw something in me. And when you meet certain people in your life who see and recognize something in you and give you a chance, she invited me to come to her lab where she had Ph.D. students doing research. And I walked in and it seemed like Disneyland in there. They had
Mm.
3D printers and laser cutters and drones flying around. And I was like, this is Nirvana. What is this? What is going on? And they're like, yeah, we are researchers. And I was like, okay, you just like read stuff? And they're like, no, we're paid to think. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. I like that. I want to be paid to think. And I did. I started my career there in that lab, in the prototyping and design lab at UMBC. Shout out to the Swamp members up there. If any of them are watching this, they'll know that reference. Yeah, I started there. I got into a research project. I published a peer-reviewed scientific paper. It won a Best Paper award. That I was a co-author on it. And really from there, I really loved technology. And because of my love for technology, and because of the fact that I grew up without having access to technology, I got really, really interested in the problem of access, the problem of accessibility. So just because I was born in a place where I didn't have access to high speed internet, I didn't have access to modern technology, um, I felt sort of wronged and started thinking about people who have abilities that are not typical, whether it's mentally or physically, from the normal, very average people who these technologies are designed for. They cannot access it. So I focused my research on accessibility, and when I started, so I was doing work where we had invented adaptive user interfaces that change itself using machine learning when a user starts having tremors, say somebody with Parkinson's or an older adult. And from there, I got a National Science Foundation fellowship, and that allowed me to explore my research a lot more because I wasn't tied to certain funding, and went and collaborated with some scientists at Carnegie Mellon University, where I was the co-inventor of a game that uses machine learning again to detect dyslexia in kids, called Detective. This game is still out in the world. Actually, we created it in 2015. It has diagnosed dyslexia in about 500,000 kids worldwide for free, which is amazing
Wow.
and one of the highlights of my career. Um, and so yeah, I've been since then I've been creating technologies, and went on to Seattle to do my PhD, where I actually met my wife. And I've been fortunate to go and help in the invention of technologies at Microsoft Research, Apple. I worked at Amazon, a few startups, and finally about a year ago I started Third Brain with my wife. I feel I've been monologuing for a little bit, so I'm just gonna pause right there and we can sort of dive deeper into different parts of my story.
Oh, you're an inspiration, Ax.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah, I yeah, sometimes when people tell their stories, it takes a minute to absorb how that journey must have shaped you in such a unique way that can help you make the world a better place. And I feel like that you're doing that now. And
Thank you.
I want to talk about Third Brain in a moment,
Yep.
uh, but I think that the first thing that we should discuss is, how has what you have observed throughout your life, and then specifically from your parents,
Mhm.
inspired you to help couples?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I feel like, we all think of ourselves as sort of the heroes of our stories. And um, for me, like I say that because we all think like we're very special, and
Hmm.
but for me, I do think the uniqueness of myself, or why I think I'm special, is that I've always questioned things, and questioned, just because something is the way it is, I didn't take it at face value. And like I said, I grew up in a completely different society. Society in the Middle East is extremely different. Even though I grew up in the socioeconomical class that I grew up in was very open minded and very progressive. I mean, all the women in my family have college degrees. My mother has had a college degree. She ran the family business. My grandfather had started a medical supplies company. She ran it for quite a few years. It was the second largest business of its type in the country. My grandmother, on my father's side, in the 70s, she founded the Iraqi Women's Association, which is a branch of the government that guaranteed women's rights to vote, to education, education, free healthcare, free higher education, um, all of those things. And yet, I did not sort of understand the distinction or the disparity between men and women, and saw that a lot in society, and then with my parents, in their relationship, of both my parents were working, and then on top of that, it was up to my mother, even though the income my mother had brought into the house surpassed my father's government salary.
Mm.
She was the one who was expected to not only cook and clean, take care of us, raise us, instill values in us, and she's been our rock. And then uh, uh, we moved here, and it was me, my mother, and my sister. My father later on joined us. So, like, moving across the ocean to a completely new world with two children is a feat that I, like, tip my hat to my mother. If it wasn't for her and her grit and resilience, I wouldn't be anywhere. And she came to this country. She started working. She's now a big executive at a company. And those disparities between my mom and dad led ultimately to their divorce. Um, and it, just seeing that as an observer, it just didn't sit right with me, from a young age. And moving to this country, and moving to this Western society at a very impressionable age, at 19, 20, years old, I was still forming my ideas of what it means to be a man, and who is my role model. And I grew up. You probably can tell my sort of very faint or lack of accent in my English is because I grew up watching American TV. I grew up watching Friends and Scrubs, and
Mm.
I would um, imitate the characters. So I was like, the majority of like my teenage years, I would sound like a mix between Chandler from Friends and Dr. Cox from from Scrubs. It was very weird to have like a 15-year-old speaking like that in a very sarcastic tone. And so all of my ideas were pretty much based on like, especially around love and relationships, were like, oh, what does Joey do, or like what does Barney do? And like those are not like good role models. And so I've always uh, sort of it didn't sit right with me. Let's just say that, of like the way, especially in strictly in heterosexual relationships, how women are treated, or how like the dynamics are being treated, especially where like some of my own interests, like cooking. I love cooking. I watched a lot of Gordon Ramsay, and I've been known to cook a mean meal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for that to be seen, just because for that to be seen sort of by like our society as guys, as like a feminine thing or something, or women belong in the kitchen and all of those things, it just like did not compute for my brain, especially because I have that outsider's perspective. I didn't like grow up with it, and I came into this society at this weird age. So in all my relationships, I've always tried to challenge those notions. I've always tried to be a better boyfriend, a more available boyfriend. And despite all of that, I failed, and I fell into those stereotypical gender roles, and that got highlighted real quickly when life got busy in my sort of current relationship, when I was still dating my wife Paige at the time, and we had been engaged. And it was in 2021 when we it was pandemic. We were moving. Both of us had gotten new jobs. We're moving from Seattle to New York, and because it was the pandemic, we had decided to do this thing where we um, planned three weddings instead of one giant one. So we did not want to,
Oh,
host a super spreader. So we
oh,
were like, okay, we are going to go on tour, and our love is going to come to the people we love. So we decided to throw a cocktail party in Seattle, in New York, and another one in Wales, because I have a lot of family who immigrated out of Iraq and ended up settling in Wales. So we're you can imagine the logistics of traveling during COVID, testing, and all of those things. And a lot of it, even though I was extremely involved, I'm a designer. I like helped design all of our like wedding invites and all of those things. A lot of it was still falling on my wife, especially the mental aspect of it. And at that time, we weren't really aware of the concept of mental load, the things that Eve Rodsky speaks about, and invisible load, and how much women have to do in terms of planning and anticipating rather than just executing, or like, just tell me what to do and I'll go do it, that us guys typically fall into. And then after that, my wife, and so during that time when we were like sort of really, really stressed out, we tried to come up with like different solutions for the problem. So we like started doing. Both of us are product managers, so we like started doing sprint planning. Anybody who works in software knows what that is,
mhm.
and is probably laughing their butts off that a couple would be doing sprint planning for their lives. And we had I had started all kinds of these fancy Notion second brain situations that will like have all of our uh, life together. And the thing is, with those types of tools, they're meant for work. They're not meant to share a life together. So they're meant and designed for a group of people to come together for a common goal. So they're like fantastic project management tools, but the dynamics between two heads of household, a couple in a romantic relationship, are different from work dynamics. And at that time, we were thinking, it was like, we even came up with the names like, what if there was a third brain that we had, like this entity that can just like organize these things for us and our sort of collective intelligence. And life moved on. We were busy. And throughout that time, my wife started noticing this trend with a lot of her female friends when, they're hanging out together by themselves, is a lot of them were like, I love my boyfriend, or I love my husband. He's very well meaning. He's very progressive. He helps out around the house. But my God, everything I have to think about. I
Hmm.
have to plan everything for him. I have to anticipate everything. It's not things like grocery shopping and gift giving and things like that. It's the planning of life in general. Like
Hmm.
unless they're like super interested in like one area of life, like if they're really into finances, then they own that thing completely. But then the rest of life, from kids planning to a cousin's birthday to everything else, it's all falling on these women. And so we started noting that trend, and we're like, oh, maybe third brain could be something here that we can pursue. And it was in the summer of 2023. I was looking for my sort of next move, and I really have been, my career has been like always leading me towards, I want to start my own company. Like that's been always a thing that I've been wanting to do. And at that time, there was a shift in technology and the accessibility of generative AI. And I've been playing with those models and seeing how easy they are, that they can provide so much value given so little input. So we decided to start Third Brain, and that's how the sort of the origin of this company started.
And before we dive into Third Brain, there are a few things that I want to point out, because if you're listening to this, you likely believe in teamwork in a marriage or in a relationship. That's why you listen. And I think it's important to point out that you're not going to be open to understanding how to equally distribute the mental load until you recognize that, I think, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, a lot of us slip into the gender norms that we grew up seeing. And like in your circumstance, in the Middle East, from what I can take from our conversation, those gender norms are exaggerated even more.
Yep.
And my frustration with that is, like you, I love to cook. I love to smoke meat. I love to
Yep.
barbecue. My brother's the same way. Like you brought up Gordon Ramsay. My brother watches the Food Network. Like whenever I'm
Yeah.
looking for ideas for leftovers, we always chat about it. It's just something I enjoy to do. And it's outrageous that someone would think that that's a feminine thing, because a lot of my friends, they like to cook as well. But there are a lot of other things too, that
Yeah.
beyond just recognizing that you as a couple need to contribute fairly, there's some things I just enjoy doing. I like a neat home. I get a little
Yeah.
I get frustrated and stressed out if my house isn't clean. That's just how I am. I'm the guy that has inbox 0.
Yep.
And my wife is the one with inbox 21,756. So sometimes just our natural skill sets are suitable to things that are like different than, I think, some gender norms. And
Yep.
yes, guys who like to cook and want a neat home, we also play fantasy football. We were also college athletes. Like it's not, it's
Yeah.
not like we all fit into this like some sort of box, right? We're not monolithic. But one of the things also that struck me as you were sharing your story is that your wife, who I think I can mention this, she works for the New York
Yep.
Times.
Yep.
She's won awards. And we're seeing more and more couples like you and your wife and my wife, who's an executive, who are crushing it in their careers. And just pragmatically, we have to be a team. There's no
Yeah.
way that you can have two working people who are high achievers operate a home in a way that's fair and that, like, as you shared, it doesn't lead to divorce, doesn't lead to additional strain or frustration in a marriage, unless you recognize that there are things that are necessary in a home to be able to, where you have to assign them, not just recognize them, assign them, and figure out ways to equitably distribute them. And much of that is the mental load. And so you've obviously done that. And I would love it if you would share a little bit about third brain and how third brain alleviates a lot of the challenges for couples who have to manage the mental load together. Listeners have told us that they love the ideas we share on our podcast to manage money in the home as a team, but want more help than one episode can provide. That's why I'm excited to announce On the Same Page Consulting for corporations, couples, and individuals. Visit modernhusbands.com and click Our Services at the top of the page to learn more about how I can help you or your employees manage money in the home as a team. Again, that's modernhusbands.com. Now back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree 100% with everything that you're saying. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background in the PH and my PhD with a little bit of philosophy. Uh, so as you and I are talking right now, I'm talking into this microphone. My voice is traveling through the cables and then through the ether, through the magic of the internet, and then it's hitting your ears through the speakers and then through the air. If we were in the same room when I'm speaking to you, the information is traveling. There is this thing called information theory. The information is traveling from the sender, which is my voice box, through a medium, which is the air, to your receiver, which are your ears. And the quality of that information that is going from me to you degrades based on the medium that it's traveling through. So the packets of information, the more space between us, the more air between us. If we're sitting next to each other in the room, you can hear me clearly. But if you're across the street, you're not going to be able to hear me that well. So imagine this idea of the medium through which information travels. And imagine if that medium was intelligent enough, was smart enough, and knows a lot about the sender and the receiver to be able to communicate and facilitate that communication between them in the way they like to receive or send information. So that's sort of the philosophical and grander idea behind third brain. In practicality, what does that mean for those just to get those who have tuned out what I was saying just now? Um, it is an application. It is an app on any phone that you have, and the way we designed it with the intention of being an organizer and a collaboration and communication tool. So we thought about sort of all the thoughts and pieces of information you need as a couple who are cohabitating and building a life together. And that information you either need it for later retrieval, so you need it as a note to remind yourself later, like um, you know um, medical history, or a list of allergies, or things that you don't really think about all the time but you might need at a later date, like you adopted a new cat and you want to track her growth. So I have a note in my third brain that has Mabel's record of weight. So that's the first part of, like, you need to a place to store information that is easily accessible for both parties. So I would be like I used to be like, hey hun, what is how what's Mabel's allergy list? What's something like I would always by default, and I think a lot of us men have shifted over to our wives as our de facto information holders who remember everything, especially the important things that we have just replaced with some fantasy football stat.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. Like that's just human brain or human capacity. So there is a shared notes function in the app. Then the other um, piece of information is that information you need to act on. So like things that you need to do, and that's not just um, take out the trash, but also get this gift, drop this thing, or things that you don't have at the top of your head, like your annual HVAC filter cleaning that you need to do at a certain time in the year. And we can't just hold things up in our head. I think it was David Allen, I think he's a productivity expert, who said, um, our brains are for coming up with ideas, not storing them. And we can't
Mhm.
just walk around storing all that stuff. So we wanted a place where you can have tasks and organize those tasks and assign them and have them recur at certain cadences and things like that. So you have an app that has notes, that has tasks, and then the final piece, by the time this airs, is probably going to be also available, is calendar events. So you can bring your calendar, your Google Calendar, put all your events in there, so you can have visibility into each other's time management and where your time is going. And this is the big word that I want to focus on here with this app, is its visibility. We're trying to make the invisible visible. So on our home screen, we surface your partner's schedule. We surface your partner's activity. What have they been thinking about? What notes they've written down recently? So if in case they forget to tell you something, you can see that they've written some stuff down. Of course, there is a privacy mode. You can mark something private, your partner doesn't see it. And you also see what your partner has been up to lately. So you can see that, like I can see that my wife submitted paperwork for this thing. She called up the vet and things like that. And the way that we are trying to encourage this behavior of seeing each other, but not also seeing it, but recognizing it, is you get to show appreciation through the app. So we built in this feature of sending bubble reactions. So when you open your app, you see a bunch of bubbles that come up on the screen of all the love that your partner is showing you and appreciation. The way we designed the entire app is by splitting it into three main sections. There is what's mine, what's ours that is shared between us, and what is my partner. So you can filter anything in the app by those three filters. So everything has a discrete owner. So I know what's on my plate, what's on her plate. And then if there is something that either one of us can take, and then when I see our sort of day, I can just, by looking at it, I can see, oh, I have a lighter day than her, then I'll take on more of the things that are like in between us both. All of that is sort of pretty um, simple and straightforward. And a lot of those apps that I have mentioned before can actually do it pretty well. Whether you have a to-do list app or something like that, a lot of those apps do it. The way that we're sort of differentiating ourselves is the way that we have been introducing artificial intelligence into these applications, and not in a way where, since Gen AI has come onto the scene, I feel like everybody's just slapping a chatbot on there. And chatbots are horrible
Yeah.
user interfaces,
Yeah.
because they put the mental load actually on the user themselves to come up with what they want the bot to do. We've spent about 40, almost 50 years now in what is known as the GUI, the graphical user interface, GUI development, of developing user interfaces and researching them for our human psychology. Our technology is changing, but our human psychology, our brains and our brain's capacity has not developed that much in the past 50 years. So our capabilities as people are still pretty much the same. We can hold the same limited number of information in our brain at a certain time. That hasn't changed. We get overwhelmed by choice, all of those things. Having to ask a bot, whether it's via voice or via typing, what we need it to do, and then give it specific instructions, is still a lot of mental cycles. So we have those interfaces that have created buttons, that have created menus, that have created a lot of, that is based on a lot of research that I myself have contributed to it, on how we would want to interact with those machines in a very efficient way. So the way we're thinking about AI we will probably introduce a chatbot at some point because it does fulfill that need of like, oh, I have this very specific piece of information that I want to ask about the information of our household that our chatbot might be able to answer. But we are not thinking about that yet. We're thinking about, okay, what can it do better? So I'll give you an example. One of the main features that we have in the app is called Brain Dump, where basically we saw the way mostly women are always busy and there's a lot of information in their brain that is all circling at the same time, and our human brain does not think in the same way. Those interfaces are going to be designed that I was just talking about. So when you're thinking, oh, I got to pick up the kids and empty out the dishwasher and think of picking up a gift for our cousin, it's not thinking, okay, this is a task, it's due this time, it's whatever, and like checking boxes in the same way our computers think. So what we did is, okay, your stream of consciousness, just dump it in there. Do a brain dump, write everything down. And then what's really good with these large language models is they can identify those patterns, identify the language that it's written in, and from there starts extracting and organizing. So we call it the capture and organize, where you basically just speak into the app, type it into the app however you're comfortable, and outsource that mental load, outsource that work to that algorithm for it to be able to organize things for you. So I wake up in the morning, usually open my third brain app and just start brain dumping. Today I want to do this, this and that and do this, but remind Paige to do that, and we need to meet with our neighbors or probably or something like that. And it'll take all of that and it starts to be like, okay, this is a piece of information that Paige needs to be aware of. So I'm going to create a note and share it and put it on Paige's side. This is a task that you need to take care of today at this time. It's a task due for you today at this time. This is an event that you both need to attend. I'm going to put it on your shared calendar. And this
And the
is
app
something.
does that for you.
Yeah, the app does all
Exactly.
of that for you.
So that's, and by the way, for the listeners, I know
Yep.
my last name is Paige, but his wife's first name is Paige. So
Yes.
there's like confusion.
Yeah.
And this is what made me fall in love with your app, is because for my wife and I, you know, we're both busy. So we obviously have a lot in our calendars that we have to schedule professionally, but and then we have a family calendar. Yes. And particularly focusing on, you know, kind of kids activities, but there's so many other things that are required to manage a home. And what I love about the brain dump is that when you wake up in the morning or throughout the day, you have things where you're like, oh, I got to do this. And just to be able to say into the brain dump, this needs to be done. And then for the program to be able to look at post schedules and then assign things based on just what you both naturally do or typically do, etc., makes it way faster to be able to operate as a team. Now I don't have to call my wife or text my wife or whatever. It just goes in there. And that saves not just a bunch of time, and when you add up these time confettis, they're significant. But it also, you know, saves you from being decision fatigued earlier in the day because you're not having to think about every little detail. It does that thinking for you. The brain dump with just being able to say it and it goes into your calendars. What an extraordinary invention. What an incredible way for couples to use technology to better manage their lives as a team. Axe, you're an inspiration. I love your app. And for our listeners, please give it a look. It will help you in your relationship.
Thank you.
Don't leave just yet. Be sure to like and subscribe before you do. And a reminder to visit modernhusbands.com if you're looking for money and home management support in your life. Just click the Our Services button at the top of the page. Again, that's at modernhusbands.com. And many thanks to our co-hosts, our guests, and of course, all of you for joining today.